All right, guys. Well, I appreciate y'all jumping on. Welcome back to Summer School, presented by Simplifaster. Simplifaster is the premier platform for performance technology and coach education. Their goal is to partner with coaches to provide resources that help coaches continue to grow in their profession, stimulate critical thinking, and provide a network of qualified coaches to enhance our industry. Simplifaster also provides performance technology, including VBT, vertical jump testing, laser timing systems, and other training needs. Head over to simplyfaster.com to learn more about our partner. Summer School aims to provide coaches the platform to dive deep into their program in a public setting and provide feedback from an expert panel. This feedback will be specific to our presenters' constraints and training parameters. It will serve as an opportunity to take home practical tools that can be implemented in the presenter's next training session. This series also serves as a platform for any coach to listen in on the conversation and ask questions in order to learn and grow themselves, as the game being brought by our presenters and panel will certainly help other listeners. Our presenter will begin with a description of the training parameters and constraints that they operate under, followed by a presentation of their program. Following the presentation, our panel will ask questions, provide feedback, and critique other potential methods that would serve to bolster our presenter's program. As listeners' questions may arise during the presentation, please send me a direct message via the chat link below, and I'll do my best to work them in at the appropriate time. My role is to serve simply as the moderator, and I'm really excited this week because that's all I have to do. But I'm simply the moderator to ask clarifying questions and relay any questions between audience, panel, and the presenter. Our panel this week consists of Ronnie Jankovich, Elton Crochran, and Joe Stokowski, three extremely great coaches, three extremely great dudes that do a really great job of coaching and growing the profession and put out great content. So I'm really excited to hear from them. But our presenter this week is Coach Jen Meza. Coach Meza serves as a contractor and advises coaches on their programming or their performance program, how to make it better, changes that they can make, and specifically some mobility and strengthening protocols and how it can help insert into their program to make them better. I'm really excited to hear from her because she comes really highly recommended by multiple coaches. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So Coach Meza, let's go ahead and get started with the training parameters. So set the kind of the foundation for us on the discussion. Talk about your program constraints, like your number of athletes that you're working with at the current setting, coaches, racks, anything you need, the amount of time. Let us know kind of what you're facing.
All right, guys. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, Coach Mullins. If you don't mind, I'll share my screen with you guys because I had so much to kind of compound in a short amount of time. So I'll just share this pretty quickly with you guys. All right, so first off, I wanted to say thank you to Coach Mullins. I know last week I was excited to jump on, and I specifically picked the second week so I could watch somebody else do it. I don't know if any of you guys are like that. But Coach Mullins, you killed it, being on the fly and everything. I still took a lot back from it. I even went on the blog today and read through kind of what we talked about last week. Thank you to the panel. I know you guys are extremely busy, and we get into this field to give back to all of the communities that we reach. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Coach Steve Schween, he's from Cienega. He is, I think, the one that recommended me for this, and that's huge because he doesn't know this, but he's my mentor. I go to him whenever I need something. He's been in the game for a while, especially in our area. There's not many strength coaches here, just in general. So he's the guy I go to. And then I know a lot of you guys are probably on your state's NHSSCA board or a part of the program. So those are my thank yous for you guys listed on there. A little bit about me real quick, because I think as strength coaches, our story kind of feeds into our philosophies and our programming and why we do the things we do. I played Division I basketball, but not for long. That's not a story you guys hear a lot. Yeah, I killed it for 4 years. I did not. I hated every second of it. I probably shouldn't have gone Division I. I probably should have actually chosen the sport that I loved, which was volleyball. But I played basketball at the University of Denver, and our training there was terrible. Our coach actually got paid out her contract without fulfilling it. That tells you kind of how bad the program was. And I quit. I stepped away from sports. I stepped away from training. I hated every part of the weight room. And that's also another story that you guys don't hear a lot in our field. You guys, when we go to the clinics, we hear everybody talk about, oh yeah, I interned here and I got to work under this coach and this coach. And every single time I'm like, so jealous. Like, I wish I had that mentorship, because that's changed within the last few years of my coaching career, completely molded me into a different person. But I did have the opportunity to be a head coach at a very young age. I was given a basketball head coaching job at my home state in New Mexico. 23 is young to me. I don't think I should have been giving a program with no experience, but they did. And I've been coaching here and there ever since. The last 4 years have been strictly just strength. Not strictly. I've been coaching sports as well, but my main focus was the strength program. I was a math teacher for a while, so I have the education background, and I was just kind of waiting for my moment to jump in. When a PE position left from the school I was at, I went to our administration. I said, hey, I really think a strength program can help our athletes. It's going to change the culture on our campus. You don't need to, because you always hear the reason, well, we don't have the money for the position, right? That's usually what admin will tell all of the people kind of wanting to start the programs at their schools. But anyways, when a PE position left, I stepped in and I said, hey, I think this is going to help us. This is why. And I just kind of laid it out there, sold the program without knowing a whole lot about what I was going to do. And that's kind of how I first started the program that I was at a high school in Arizona. I stayed there for 3 years, and then I just recently moved a little bit south, like really close to the border of Mexico. And that's where I'm at currently. I was the strength coach there last year. And then this year I'm stepping away from that role. This was not really planned. It was kind of just how it happened over the last few months. And I asked Coach Mullins, I said, a few months ago, I was, ready to rock and roll and move on, present here and move on with my summer program in the high school. I had everything set, all the changes I wanted to make, all the equipment I was going to buy. And I was kind of forced into this position where they didn't want a female in the weight room with the football team. So I had to stand my ground. I proved time and time again the things that I was doing were the correct things. And they kind of stuck with the head football coach position. And so that's when I removed myself from that school. And it kind of forced me into starting my own business. So I tried to figure out why so many high schools didn't have a strength coach, because of the value that it brings to everything on campus, not just alone the athletes, but the culture, the environment. So I'm trying to solve, right, when you start a business, you're trying to solve a problem. So the problem here is we don't have a lot of strength coaches in general. So with the new business that I'm starting, I'll be going to schools, figuring out, well, one, what the program is, what they need. And I'll kind of take you guys through all that in a second, but that's where I'm coming into this as. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Let me move on to the next one. The last 3 years I should say my first 3 years, I trained. This is embarrassing because not a lot of people will talk about what they sucked at in the beginning of their career, but I'm putting it out there, guys. So, and I know this, as I'm writing this, I'm like, Jesus, like, it's really hard to say because of what we know now. But yeah, I trained my athletes in body part splits and they were sore as heck all of the time. And I'm like, why are you guys sore? Maybe you're not sleeping enough. Maybe you're not eating enough. But I was really the one just putting too much volume and not programming correctly. I didn't track a lot. We didn't have equipment to do so. And I've kind of blamed that on not measuring a lot of things, which I've come to realize there's still plenty of ways to do so, even when you don't have the equipment or the money to buy the equipment. We tested our verticals, our 1 rep maxes, and that was really all we tested. I did not introduce any speed and plyo training because when I was starting into that role, I really needed to do what the football coach wanted me to do. And he didn't want them to sprint or jump or anything like that. He just wanted them to be really strong. Okay, so I made them really strong, but then they couldn't move, right? They're having a lot of mobility issues, and I'll be the first one to say, man, if I could go back 3 years and train that same group of kids, it would be a different outcome. But we didn't do a whole lot of speed and plyo training. We didn't talk about leadership. We didn't talk about culture. We didn't really touch on nutrition except for here's your protein shake as they're walking out the door. I was really good at the recruiting process because I've been through it before and I had a good relationship with the counselors. So that was something that I did well. But I think the best thing within those 3 years is it gave me the itch to want to learn more. So I started going to conferences. I joined the NSCA. I studied to take my CSCS. I went to every single clinic that I could go to. So that was, I guess, if we're trying to see the bright side of things, those first 3 years, I messed up a lot. But I learned from all of those. When we're talking about kind of like the programs, the restraints and stuff like that, my first high school that I was at, you guys can see a picture of this rack. Some of these worked, most of them didn't. They're made not so well on the back part. They're the pins that would break almost every day. The benches would fall literally as athletes are doing incline press, which is not safe. We didn't have the square footage for how many kids we had in there. And I say that not to just blame things but this was pretty realistic for a lot of high schools. You walk into the weight room and you get what you get. How do you make that work, right? You have to take into account the number of athletes you have, what they've already been through, training age, movement patterns. If you're able to have a budget, usually not, but access to equipment, how many coaches do you have helping you? And then how often do you see those kids? So taking all those into account, let me go back a little bit. I feel like I did what I could where I was, but like I said, going backwards, you don't know what you don't know, right? If I could go back and train those kids those first 3 years that I was with them, man, I would do a lot different. But going forward into my 4th year, this was kind of half of my setup of what our weight room was. We had 10 racks, 5 on each side. So they're open racks. They had the cable attachments in between. We had 2 Olympic bars at each rack. We had a hex bar at each rack, bumper plates, nice, beautiful setup. We didn't have a lot of space. You guys can see those 2 big pillars in the middle. That kind of messed up the flow a little bit of everything. But when I came into the program, the first few things I asked the athletic director, and then I met with the sport coaches, like, what are our athletes lacking here? The movement stuff we'll get to, right? But like, what are low-hanging fruit that we can reach? What are some things that we struggle with in this community? And surprisingly, it was they don't want to win. They don't feel like they can win. They're just here to play. Everything was kind of victim mentality, and they didn't have a culture established on campus. The number of athletes that were in the classes, it ranged from 20 to 50. And at most, they had 1 solid year of training. They were very small, very frail, easily injured. They didn't have a lot of mass on them. So that was kind of what I was walking into. I talked a little bit about the weight room. One thing that I did get when I was there, I took it to our assistant athletic director of the whole district and said, I really feel like since I don't know about you guys, but we had all different athletes in the class. So it's volleyball, basketball, tennis, all in one rack, right? It's just random and we're not split up by sports. So I said, hey, these iPads would really help us because I can program a lot of different things and have it in one rack. And so they were nice enough to give us 10 iPads and then access to Team Builder. So that's what we used last year. It was just myself in the weight room for all of the classes. I put me, myself, and I until it wasn't, because halfway through, there was another teacher in there with me who was extremely textbook smart and could spit off page 295 from our textbook that we learned from, but didn't know how to run a class. And man, I wish I could have stolen some of the thoughts in his head to be able to teach it to the class, but just couldn't really go with the flow of class. You know, it's different than a sport practice, but, you know, we have a bell work, we have an opening objective, what we're trying to accomplish. We have our meat of the lesson, and then we have to wrap it up in some way. And we had to do that every 40 minutes, right? So there was a lot of logistics that had to be put into our program to do so. The things that I changed my 4th year. So I definitely focused on our movement patterns. I made sure that we could squat, we could hinge. We knew how to push, we knew how to pull. As you guys know, high school kids suck single leg anything, really. So we definitely spent a lot of time on that. And then rotation, they had a lack of connection to their body just in general. So rotation was really hard for them. Our first level, essentially, we had different kind of levels throughout. You could graduate, but our base level was high volume. We had to make sure that they were consistent, and Team Builder was pretty cool because we could track, you know, if they were here in the summer, we used that attendance for how consistent they were. And then eventually they would graduate to what a high school version of contrast training would be. Again, with our parameters that we had and with our space, we did have to change a few things time-wise that I think if we're talking about like a pure contrast training program at the high school level, the time in between sets and reps probably wasn't ideal. And I'll be the first one to say that's something I would change if I could. We did track with daily science questions, our water, our food, our motivation, like how coachable are you coming into the weight room today? And that opened up so many doors to building relationships with the kids. We did test our 40s. We tested our 60s for our baseball players. We did a T-test, broad jump, vertical, and we tested 3 rep maxes instead of 1. I should say, I stole this from Western New Mexico, the strength coach there. He's only been there probably 1.5 years, maybe 2 years now. They did a prehab rehab. Well, if you guys are in a high school setting and you only have so many racks and 3, 4, 5 people sometimes in one rack, well, one person is doing a squat, whatever, and they're doing a back squat, and the other person is doing their jumps. Well, what is everybody else doing? And high schoolers like to cause trouble if they are not doing anything. So we had to kind of spin it like, hey, how are you getting better today? Everybody trains, but what are you doing different? And so I stole this from Western. He called it something different, but we started calling it intra-lifts, even though it's not necessarily prehab rehab. They're 90-90s, combat stretch, handcuffs with rotation, things to get the kids moving a lot better. Because I learned that the first 3 years of my strength coaching career, if you just make them big and bulky and they can't move, you're not going to win a lot of games that way. So that was one thing that I definitely took away and ran with, and I'm still kind of tweaking it today. We developed a leadership program, and I can't tell you how much that's paid off because there's no real way to measure that. I'm trying to, because I think that's going to make a pretty cool book or paper one day. But our leadership program that we started to develop in the weight room changed everything for us. We started a personal development program so that the kids had more buy-in into everything, into all of their classes, into their life outside the weight room, the life outside the court. We started creating a winning mindset because if we rewind a little bit, right, the athletic director said, like, the kids don't want to win, they just want to play. And I don't know, but the athlete inside me dies a little bit when I hear that sentence. Like, we play to win, right? There's a lot of lessons we learn, but you're playing to win, right? So we had to start creating that mindset. And I, at first, didn't know how to teach that. I thought people were just like that. Like, I was just born with the competitive edge to just dominate whatever I tried to do. There's a lot of people out there that are not like that. So we created that through a lot of competitions. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, we're trying to build this, I hate the word holistic approach, but it kind of really had to be. It was from all angles of trying to reach the athlete to grow. So that was a progression for my first 3 years. So the last year that I was at my last high school. So when we talk about the contrast training, I know like this is a lot of your guys is like, this is where you guys thrive and we all nerd out about this stuff. And I'm not married to any program. I really had a hard time with the time, 40 minutes, and I'm trying to like max these kids out with their full potential every single time. I'm not really sold on anything yet, but this is what I used last year. A few things that I liked about it, the time constraint, like I said, about 40 minutes after they dress out and the time at the end of class. And then we talk about anything that we need to. They have about 40 training minutes, sometimes less. So the time constraints work pretty well with contrast training, but I did have to shorten the rest periods. The rest periods were not the 8 to 12 minutes or the sometimes even 3 to 12 minutes like all the research says. It was around probably max 3 minutes. And so I don't know if that had a lot to do with our results. But, and this, again, this was only done after the base level. So after they, you know, had a lot of volume under their belt, their movement patterns looked really good. This was not done with the 8th graders and the freshmen that were coming in because they just needed a lot of practice. I did feel like this had more transfer to sport than my first 3 years of training a different style. I did see like our volleyball players be able to express the power a heck of a lot better. We were able to tie, we were able to cross over the two, because sometimes there's like a barrier between the weight room and the court. Well, I don't like that. I want everything we do in here. I want you to see the benefit in what we do on the court, because I wasn't training Olympic athletes, right? I was training, you know, volleyball players, basketball players, baseball. So I needed that transfer to sport, and I feel like contrast training really did that with our athletes. I'm not going to read through all of these. I know this will be posted, right, Coach Mullins, on the whole thing will be posted on there?
Yes, we'll post it on, we'll post a copy of the slides in the Simplifaster article, and we'll post the whole thing to YouTube.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not going to read through exactly what it was, but essentially we were doing something like a front squat with some kind of jump. If we're, again, talking about the pure contrast training program, there's a lot of research saying, you know, the squat needs to be with a vertical jump, or the squat needs to be with the rate of force development, right, as the focus. Sometimes we had to change it, and that wasn't often, but like we had outside of our weight room, we had a speed hall that was trashed and they didn't take care of it. And it had turf that was kind of bubbling up. Well, I'm not going to have my athletes sprint on that if they're going to trip and fall, right? So we kind of had to change a few of the things just because of our constraints. Besides our 3 big lifts, we also did unilateral, like I talked about earlier. So a lot of single leg stuff. We did different planes, right? We did lateral, of course, and then we did a lot of movement. But we lost a sled halfway through the year, so that kind of pulled our sled out of our movement pattern, or out of our locomotive movements, so we didn't get a chance to do that. But we did what we could with what we had. I think that's all I really needed to say about that. If I go forward a little bit, we can talk about the training, and I'm really interested in hearing the panel's thoughts, because I know velocity-based movement is like the thing right now. We didn't do that the last few years, but I really think that the reason why our strength program was growing so much this past year was because of everything else we did in the weight room. When I go and I observe a lot of high schools, because I am just a learner at heart. I want to learn from everybody. Like, something that you do might work really well at where I'm at, and just that one tiny thing can change the whole dynamics of what I'm doing in my classroom or in the weight room. But when I went to a lot of high schools, I noticed that the coaches were barking orders or on the whistle, and then there was like a wall in between them and all the athletes. And I have trialed and errored this one a lot. I will get more from my athletes when I have a relationship with them. Strictly professional to athlete, but when the kid can come to me about anything, that's how I know I did a good job with that kid building a relationship. So we focus on building relationships, so the athlete to athlete, athlete to coach. A huge one for us was the sport team to the community. We have a really small community here, and the kids kind of thought it was like a negative thing. And I'm like, heck no, use that to our advantage. There's really big cities out there that don't have this sense of community. Like, let's get involved with the community. Let's go read to the elementary school. Let's go, we're picking up trash. Like, we're doing those things here to start building that relationship with the community that they already have here. Like I talked about earlier, the check-in questions would open that door for conversation to develop a relationship with the kids. So one of the questions, is how would you rate your sleep, the quantity and quality of your sleep last night? Well, when a kid is constantly answering 1 and 2 out of 10, that's a really easy, like, hey, what's going on with your sleep? Why are we not getting enough sleep? And it opens the door for the kid to know that you care, because you cared enough to check and then come check on the kid. But it'll give you a lot of answers to other things going on that we can't see just with their bar speed, that we can't see just with how they walk down the hall. So the check-in questions really, like I said, really open that door. I talked about earlier, we created a winning culture, or we tried to start the process of it. It's not going to be a one-year thing. I think this has been kind of the way that it's been the last however many years, so it's going to take a while. But we started incorporating winning with everything. Like, how did you win that one set? How did you win going to your next class? How did you win your recovery for the night? We started putting that in our conversation, our normal talk, all of the time. And then, like, it just happened, like, over time, over a period of time, the kids started thinking that way. Everything was a competition, even if it was just with themselves. They turned it into a competition, which was huge for changing our culture on campus. Another thing that I really fed off of was the leadership program and the personal development things that we did in the weight room. I took different parts of books and we would discuss it as we would call winning thought of the day. So I put just kind of a list on here for people to reference. The top ones were more for the athletes. Of course, the coaches, I believe we'll take a ton from them, but those were more for the athletes. And then the ones under were more for the coaches and the strength coaches on here that I just took a ton from. We started using rack leaders. I know a lot of people do that, but I constantly went to the rack leaders. I made them learn how to use their voice by putting them in those uncomfortable positions of leading people that they normally wouldn't lead. Freshmen and sophomores, they're not supposed to lead until they're juniors and seniors. Well, what happens when you make them in charge of the seniors, right? So it kind of was a weird dynamic when they were learning it, but once they got it, just the mutual respect across the classroom, you didn't have any behavioral problems because everybody just felt a sense of accountability for that class, for that space. they were in charge of having a pulse on the campus for me, because I know, like you guys, we're stuck in our weight room all day long. Like, I can count on one hand how many times I left the weight room to go to somewhere else. So I made our RAC leaders in charge of, like, what's going on campus? Are there any things that we need to talk about? They were in charge of coming up with community service ideas, and then they would pull lessons or things that were happening on their team to come back to the class to talk about. So our captain missed practice, and now he still gets to start in the game, and I'm not okay with that. And we would talk about it as a class, not to bash the person, but just like, hey, how can we use this as a learning moment and grow from it? Maybe it's a discussion you have with your team. Maybe it's a discussion you have with your coach or your parents or whatever it is, but it would just give them a different perspective of things that they were struggling with in their teams. I think I'm going to pause right there because now I'm kind of taking a turn to the next part. Does anybody have any questions about maybe the contrast training or any of the relationship stuff that we did?
That's awesome, Coach. I appreciate that. That's a very, very well done and well thought out, because like you said, I'm already at like 2.5 pages of notes. So like what we do and how we program things matters. Like the orders that we do things, the amount of volume, the intensity, like you hit on, when you're especially reflecting on your first 3 years, like those things matter. But like you said, it's everything else. Like I've seen really successful programs have really terrible programs, but their physical program when they hit the field is really good. And it's not because of what they're doing in the weight room, but everything else that goes into it, how they're executing it, the intentionality, all those things. So that's awesome. Panel members, y'all have any questions or anything you want to ask before we get into what Coach is doing now?
No, I think everything you talked about is right on. I mean, you got to create that winning mentality, and I think we as coaches sometimes, we get caught up in essentially wanting it more than the kids do, and that's frustrating when there's so many tools and so many things that can be had to help with their success, but the kids don't want to take advantage of them. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the contrast training, especially when you're talking about having limited time and everything. I think as a strength coach, our biggest enemy is time, but our biggest ally is space. So if you have a lot of space and you're shorter on time, I think that if you put the right program together, you can create a winning program. It's when you have limited space and limited time, that's when it's like, do your best and good luck. So, I wrote down notes and suggestions and stuff, but I'll definitely let you get into the rest of your presentation. But kind of went through some of the same challenges and stuff at my previous school. So you're not alone.
Thank you.
This is why we do this. This is why we have those conversations, because we all feel that to some point in some aspect, but how we work through those issues and how we work through those things to help each other is really what it's about. So no, I think you're doing great. So let's see what you got. Let's see the rest of it.
All right. So I told you guys I stepped away from being the strength coach at one high school. And I know my purpose is to be a coach because I've gone to the private sector and I've done the Gen Pop and I hated life. I was meant to coach. And the weight room is, you guys know, the energy in the weight room is just like, you can't beat it. You can't match it. I haven't found anything else that will even come close to the energy you can create in a weight room and the tools that it gives to the kids. So what I'm doing now is I started a hybrid. I started a business. It's an LLC now, but it's a hybrid model of me going to a program, going to a high school, going to a team, whoever hires me, seeing what they have, the constraints that they already have, their space, their equipment, what their sport coach wants. That's huge, right? Because they're the people bringing me in. And to provide value on a lot of different fronts, develop their whole athlete, and start a conversation about getting a qualified strength and conditioning person at their school. I've talked or rewind when I went to North Carolina, gosh, when was it? Maybe January for the NSCA coaching clinic. I pulled a lot of resources from that conference about how to get a strength and conditioning department with a school that will claim budget is the reason why. And I have a lot of resources to pass on, and essentially to grow the high school strength field. I have seen firsthand how much impact we can have as coaches in this field. Yes, one, cool if they get a scholarship, like that's the ultimate goal with these kids, is to get them to use their sport as a tool to make it to the next level, or as a way to get to the next level. But we're also developing people, and we can't forget that, right? So it's to grow our field, because the more of us that are out there changing these kids' lives, the better our world essentially is going to be. And I have 3 kids of my own, right? So that's important for me. So I'm very, very new into this. So any business, anything, I have my email at the very end of this slide, like send me all the stuff that you guys can. And give me like harsh feedback, like this is a dumb idea, don't do it. Like I'm totally up for anything. But yeah, so here it is. I went to a school in New Mexico. Their volleyball coach reached out to me, and she sees the value in having a really strong program, but they don't have one there. They have a weight room. To give you an idea, their weights class last year had 3 people in it. So she estimated about 20 athletes to be at the summer program. We actually had around 36-ish each day. So I split the sessions into a beginner, because in New Mexico, 8th graders can play a high school sport. So they invited 8th graders to their training. So we had the lower level, 8th grade and freshmen, and then essentially everybody else. Most of their training age was less than a year. I don't know if you would even count that weights class as a training year, but for sure less than a year for these kids. We tested their verticals and we tested their T-test. Their scores were, all of them were under what the range, even the really low range would be, except for one of their athletes, to give you an idea. The equipment that they have there, they had 4 half racks. They had 10 Olympic bars, 5 benches, a few plyo boxes, 2 hex bars, and then I gave them access to Team Builder. So instead of iPads, they're tracking with their phones. The workouts were split for which level they were. So the beginning level, again, they were just getting the very basic movement patterns: squat, hinge, push, pull, a little bit of rotation and some single leg stuff. And when I physically went down there to start it, I spent 4 days there. So Monday through Thursday, I was there with them for 3 hours each day with just the kids. 2 of those hours were in the weight room, and 1 hour was them playing their sport and me just observing. And then I would spend an hour after with the coaches, just the coaches. So really I was there for 4 hours with the program. What we got from that, what we set up before I left, I gave them a dynamic warm-up to get them moving. We talked about mobility and intra-lifts, and I showed them kind of for their sport what would be best for them in previous injuries. We talked about, obviously basic movements in proper form. I guess the hard part for me to hand over, yes, they have access on their phones, but there's a billion programs that they could access. I still want to keep the personal connection with the coaches in the program. So I guess that's kind of where I'm open to a lot more suggestions, because just like you guys, you don't really want to just give your program and say good luck, like wish you the best, see you in 4 months or whatever it is. So I'm kind of trying to handhold as much as I can while I get this program off the ground. But they were completely new to developing leaders. Like they didn't have captains. The coaches did everything. They didn't entrust any kind of responsibility to the players. So once I did that, even with our warm-up lines, it already changed. And you saw different people leading, and that was already eye-opening to the coaches. They were tasked with creating a team identity. We talked about having a phrase or a word to keep going back on. And then we started building relationships with the athlete to athlete, athlete to coach, because that one wasn't very good either. And then we started the conversation with the athletic director to get a qualified person in their program. So right now they're online. So I came back on Friday, and so yesterday was their first day kind of flying solo. I checked in with the coaches to see how it was. They had a few questions. I gave feedback. I actually sent a video message to them, so they felt like I still had, connection to them, and I wasn't just like, here you go, good luck. They're going to be in the weight room 4 days each week for 8 weeks. And then I was planning a new block. When I switch the new block, it'll be their first week of season. So in New Mexico, their first week of volleyball high school season is the first week of August. So I was planning to go down there for not during tryout week, but the week after they make teams, to do an in-person, like kind of checkup, like, hey, this is what we're going to switch, or hey, this is what we need more time for, and to retest their vertical and their T-test. So that's kind of what happened so far. This was actually all of their scores from what they self-assessed for their check-in questions. So I kind of blocked out their names here, but you can see from a scale of 1 to 10 what they were rating their food intake. So the quality and quantity, just to start that conversation of sleep, quality and quantity of sleep. And then the next one was their nutrition, their hydration, their stress. So how stressed were they walking into the weight room? And then the second to last one is their motivation. This was a huge one for the coach because, like I mentioned, they didn't have really a good relationship with the coach. And a lot of times the coach was, pouring into an athlete. Well, if their motivation is on 0 and their stress is on 9, that athlete is not hearing anything that we say. It doesn't matter how good our relationship is. They're not going to hear it that day. So these check-in questions let the sport coaches know they can see it right away. But also on my side, I can give more feedback to the sport coaches. Hey, these are a few topics to talk on, either with your athletes. And then the last column on there, the colors. So this is a very easy, quick, I use this with my class, quick, easy way to kind of get a gauge on your team for the day. Green, like you're doing great on your sleep, your food, your water, your stress is low, your motivation's high, like we're ready to rock and roll. That tells the coach, like, you can push on the gas with these athletes and they're going to respond. A yellow is I'm probably struggling with one of these things, but I'm doing okay. I'm here, right? Like those yellow ones, you kind of have to teach how to like self-internalize and go based on how they feel. I know I don't even like using that word, but they have to kind of self-regulate, I guess is the best way to say it. And then the red is like, hey, something's off. Like I'm not doing well. I need to talk to you probably about something. And that's a quick, easy way. So this was on a Monday, right? These were their real answers from yesterday. When I'm reading this as a strength coach, if I have all my athletes come in, this is a Monday after 3 days of rest, and they're all in the yellow, what the heck are we doing wrong? So that's kind of what I'm talking about. It opens the door to the conversation of us getting better. It's not you telling me your color and me yelling at you and saying, oh my gosh, you didn't recover right this weekend. It's how can I give you the tools, or how can I make you see how important it is that we hit our recovery on the weekend so that Monday we can go hard like we're supposed to. So them all being in the yellow was kind of sending these red flags to me as a coach, saying we're doing something wrong on the weekend. Let's start that conversation and try to figure it out from there. So that was feedback to the sport coaches. I'm kind of guiding their conversation on what they should have with their athletes. And it's, again, giving them quick feedback that they can use that day. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. I know I have a lot to figure out by trial and error with this business plan. It's very different than being able to teach a class all year long and like incorporate these things. You have your eyes on them all the time. But that's essentially kind of what my idea is, to be able to still help the sport teams that want the strength conditioning part of it, but not being in a classroom, because I thrive in a classroom. But you give me 4 days, like how much wisdom can I impart on these coaches in those 4 days? That's kind of where where I'm kind of having a hard time just turning it over and saying, here you go. So any feedback on that part will help me. I did put some questions on here, maybe for the panel to address if they have any good feedback from me. I don't have a lot of assessment tools besides my stopwatch and usually something to jump with. And I don't know. I read so much and I hear from so many awesome coaches, like all these tools. When we hear about it, we want to use it, right? But like, I know that isn't going to do a sport coach any good if they're just numbers to that person. They can't really internalize and change their programming based on it. So I guess any assessments that you guys have, the best use of time, since I'm only with them for a short amount of time. And then I was wondering, for my training blocks, if I should lengthen them because I'm not in person with them. Do they probably need more time with these movement patterns before we change the programming a little bit? So I guess that's where I'll kind of turn it over, and hopefully you guys can help me out.
Awesome, Coach. I appreciate it. We'll go
thank you.
straight in and turn it over to the panel to kind of address some of your questions and ask you some clarified questions. I got a couple we'll work in here in just a few minutes, but I'll turn it over to Coach Jankovich, Coach Croc, and Coach Stokowski.
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Croc. You got it, babe. You started.
Okay. All right. Again, Jen, appreciate you sharing. Like I said, I was in a similar situation. I was just sitting here writing out notes, and it was just taking me back to where I was in the same situation. I had anywhere from 30 to 50 kids, a 50-minute block. We had to give them 7 minutes to change out and get in their attendance lines. And then we had to give them 7 or 8, 10 minutes, depending on, the period, if it was middle school, if it was girls, if it was boys. So you're, essentially working with 30 to 35 minutes-ish to train, right? And so the way I broke it down and what I did was, when I was at my previous school, we took about 5 minutes for the warm-up, and we warmed everybody up in the gym. And then when we finished the warm-up, I gave them 60 seconds to transition. So if it was boys athletics, the weight room was in the boys gym. If it was girls athletics, they had to run across a field to the gym, to the other gym, to the weight room. And like you talked about building like leadership and stuff like that, I got out there and ran with the kids. So it was always like, hey, don't let me beat you to the weight room. If you do, we're going to the track. And a couple of times I snuck up on them and I beat them and we went to the track. But for the most part, that enthusiasm and everything was there. Like, hey, don't let Coach Croc beat you. And especially with the girls, they'd see me and they'd start screaming. So you go 5 minutes for your warm up, 1 minute to 2 minutes for your transition time. And then what I actually did, kind of like your contrast training, was I split them up in a block A and a block B, and I split the athletes in half. So let's say you have 40 kids in a weight room, and like you talked about, you have 4 racks, 4 benches, 10 bars, whatever the case may be. I would split the weight room up where the benches would be like a primary exercise and a primary piece of equipment, and the racks would be a primary. So for example, block A might be a squat movement, a spotter, your jumps, right? Your plyos, your mobility, and then maybe like a unilateral squat, maybe a lunge or a lateral lunge, something that's not too intensive that it takes away from your squat movement. But like you said, it keeps them active, keeps them doing something. So that right there is 5 kids on one rack. One kid's in the rack, one kid's behind them spotting. The third kid's off to the left or right side of the rack doing their jumps. The fourth kid is behind the rack in the spotter doing their unilateral squat movement. And then that fifth kid is, maybe on the opposite side of the rack doing their mobility, right? And then you think about a time breakdown, I would give them, we got 4 sets at 3 minutes. So, hey, you have 3 minutes to get all 5 exercises in. So you controlling the weight room, hey, first set, whistle, minute, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Here we go, set 2. So then now you're kind of upping the tempo, getting them moved with purpose. Everybody's doing something. Same thing with your block B. Maybe they're doing their bench press, the spotter. Maybe you're doing some type of pull. You said you had dumbbells, so maybe they're doing like their dumbbell row or something like that. Some type of upper body mobility. And then again, a unilateral press or pull. So where everybody's doing something and it's the same thing. So whether you're on block A or block B, you got 3 minutes to hit all 5 stations, right? And then after 12 minutes, you flip them. So you go 5 minutes for the warm up, a minute or 2 for the transition, 12 minutes for block A, 12 minutes for block B. That's 24, 29, 30, 31 minutes on top of explaining, hey, this is what block A is. Anybody have any questions? This is what block B is. Anybody have any questions? Flip them. That puts you at about 35 minutes right there. So that's literally what I did. And I had the same setup where it was 4 racks, 4 platforms, 4 pull downs, 4 landmines, 4 benches, and an open space. Another thing that I've done too, I threw jump ropes in my programming, right? We would always do for our plyometrics and stuff, we would do pogo hops, single leg pogo hops. And then it dawned on me, like, these kids' rhythm is terrible. So let's give them some jump ropes, and just implement jump ropes. So, hey, you got a squat movement, you got a spotter. Instead of jumping, you got 40, double overs, or you got 40 or 20 single legs, 20 on the right, 20 on the left, and then drop your jump rope, move to the next exercise. So little things like that, where they're kind of getting uncomfortable, they're training, but they're efficient with their time. And then, one thing I think that kind of puts you in an advantageous position is you're a female coach. So it's the female athletes are typically the neglected athletes. So you kind of have an easier in as far as and I would pump yourself up. Hey, I played D1 basketball. I've been doing this for X amount of years. How can I help your team? And I think a lot of coaches, especially coaches that work with female athletes, know that they're neglected. So I would big yourself up and hey, I'm helping volleyball at this school. What does the basketball program look like? Can I help that? And then from there, when other teams see the success of your programs, then you're going to get the male coaches like, hey, Jen, you got time maybe to help with baseball or, and then next thing you know, you have 4, 5, 6 teams at one school. And then, like I said, you kind of hype yourself up, build yourself up, and then you take that and, help promote yourself to other schools, But I think you're definitely on the right track. And like you said, it's trial and error. Don't feel bad. I looked at my programming from 10 years ago and I was disgusted with myself. The exercise selection, exercise order, and reps and sets. So I definitely think you're on the right track. And I definitely think that, as you get more comfortable checking in with the coaches, you'll definitely get that hey, can you come back maybe again next week? I know you're going to miss a couple of weeks, and that will just build that relationship like you talked about. And then that sport coach becomes your biggest ally because they may have came from another high school and they know that they have a need for a strength coach. And then you kind of let them do the promotion and do the selling for you. So that way you're not sending 1,000 emails to coaches inquiring if they would love a strength coach and then getting hit with the, we don't have the money or we don't know the logistics. And it's like, just say no. Don't give me the runaround. Just tell me, nah, I'm good. So I'll keep it at that. Otherwise I'll be talking forever. So.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. I'm going to steal the jump rope idea because the volleyball coach was actually asking, we like to jump rope. How would you throw that in there? And I go, well, let me think about that one. So that's perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm going to quickly jump ahead of Joe. That way I'm sandwiched between 2 really smart people, and hopefully you guys will forgive me. Jen, I'm going to say this. You crushed it. Like I'm writing things down and I'm like, okay, that's great. It's a good question to bring. And then you answer it. I'm like, geez, okay, now I got to cross that one off. And I'm writing the next note, and then you answer it. You're doing a great job. You know, I probably could have turned you off, like listening to the whole thing after the first 10 minutes of you speaking, because I knew you were going to crush it. Like you showing your program for your first 3 years. Like I had a panic attack. Like my anxiety was like going through the roof. It was like, if you saw what I did, like I'd probably be fired. Like it was bad. It was really bad because I didn't have any background in this. I'm not a trained chef. You know, I'm the guy that kind of takes bologna and chips and white bread and makes something out of it. You know, like that's my background. So you're doing a great
What's
job.
wrong with, whoa, before you go any further, what's wrong with bologna, chips, and white bread? I grew up on that, man.
That's what I grew up on. So that's why I said I can handle stuff like that. You ain't getting a 5-course meal out of me. You're getting a bologna sandwich with Doritos.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so you're crushing it. You're doing a great job. The jump rope, love the jump rope. If I had more space, it'd be great for us. We kind of just use an imaginary jump rope as much as we possibly can, just because we don't have the space for it. Going back through things, what's important to you? So best assessments with no equipment, video, everything. There's apps on iPads and all that stuff that you can film and time and show jumping and all that stuff. You don't even have to beat it for that. Those coaches can do that. You know, one of the old schools I was at, every single kid had an iPad. So we're in a room with 20 racks. I have 50 kids in there. Little Johnny and little Susie, it's at rack 20. I'm at rack 1 helping them. I'd always like that last set was always videoed and then sent to me through like Google Classroom. So I always had a running tab of what their squats looked like and what was on the bar. So even if I couldn't see it, I can go back and rewatch it. Or like little Johnny, I got hurt today squatting. Okay, well, let's go back and look at the video and see why. Because you obviously can't see everything, and you're not going to be at every training session. So the more you can film and you can critique that way and work with your coaches, educate the people that are in the room the entire time, the better off you're going to be. And then again, we all know social media drives everything. You want to make more money, you better put your stuff out there, put your name out there and show people what you do. That's what kids want to see anyway. They want to be on social media. They want to see themselves. Coaches want to see themselves. Coaches want to see their programs doing well. So you got to push that part of stuff. Let's see. I think that's really all I had. Besides, I think you're crushing. I did have a question for you. I don't know if we're supposed to do that or right or wrong. I want to learn a little bit, so I'm gonna why we're here. So a kid comes in with zero motivation. So as a coach, what are you guys doing? What are you doing, Jen, in that situation? Because there was a couple people on there, zero motivation, 2 hours of sleep. Like, okay, this kid really is either having a rough time or really doesn't want to be here. So how do you approach that?
So throughout the year, one thing I did have to teach my classes was the intrinsic motivation. It can't always be extrinsic. You can't always have a coach pushing you. So we had to learn, we all had to learn together what intrinsic motivation was. And so it was tied to figuring out what our why was. So why do you play this sport? Why is it important that you get better at this? Why do you want to own $1 billion company one day? It didn't even have to be sports related. That was kind of how we tied it to our intrinsic motivation. It has to be bigger than yourself. So starting to have those conversations about something other than yourself kind of opens their teenage tunnel vision into there's more that I probably need to think about. Sometimes it is sleep. Sometimes it is something going on at home, but seeing that number on there, like I said, opens the door to the conversation. It really depends on your relationship with the kid. Like if this is a new kid, they're not a new athlete to me, they're not going to open up and tell me, hey, I was up because my parents were fighting all night, right? But if it's a kid 3-4 months down the road, they're telling me that kind of stuff. Like I've heard more things than I probably wanted to, but it's trying to figure out like why their motivation is the way it is and how we can give them the tools to not have it be, on Team Builder, it ranks them like a red, yellow, green, kind of like I do. So anything under a 4 was a red, and you can set those parameters on there. But that motive, and especially it was only their second week in their program, like something's going off. So that was one of the feedback things that I sent to the sport coach was like, let's start the conversation about intrinsic motivation and tying it to a why. So that was their task for the week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Come on, Joe. Show your face.
All right. First off, I'm sorry you're looking at a decade-old picture of me. I cannot figure out how to work my camera on my phone. I'm an hour away from my house right now, so I apologize. I also apologize because I was 20 minutes late because the original email Coach Mullen sent said 8:30, and I read emails about once every 6 weeks, so that's my fault. No, I really appreciated your presentation, and I really felt some of the things you were saying about like having to work with coaches. Like you have to be able to put not just ideas but pictures in their head about how it's supposed to be. And I relate to that in a massive way. I just took over. I didn't take over. I'm working as a kind of an assistant strength coach with an emphasis of speed and explosiveness training. But I'm going from working with about 70 athletes to 180. And I don't actually get to work with all 180 on an individual daily basis. So I'm having to coach the coaches. And so I know one thing that I've been doing with my coaches that people have helped me with over the years has just been the idea of like, when you go on social media, like other than the information that you're providing to your coaches, they're either going to see incredibly good examples of things or incredibly bad examples of things. And I think the toughest part is understanding the gray area or the, okay, that lift wasn't perfect. This is what they did well. This is where they could improve versus like, this is totally unacceptable in the form of like, this is dangerous to the athlete. And I think sometimes those gray areas, like a coach knows when it looks perfect and they know when it looks horrible. But just seeing some of that in between and understanding that, I think can be something that can really help those coaches. Cause I know like, when I was a young coach and I was learning, that was something that definitely helped me along the way. And obviously the coaches that you're going to be working with, they're going to be using you as a resource because you're going to be the expert. And just being able to take that knowledge and break it down into bite-sized bits for them to understand, I think is going to be a huge key for this taking off. Cause like, I can obviously see the vision you have and them being able to join you on that journey with their athletes, and being able to kind of use your expertise through their eyes, I think is going to be a huge benefit to those athletes.
I think you hit the nail on the head on that one, especially with not only, so many of us that work, that train teams. We have coaches roll through where they know enough to be dangerous, but they also know enough to throw your entire program off by saying the wrong thing. So that coaching the coaches is extremely important when it comes to being all on the same page, but also especially in a situation like Coach Meza's is that, well, she's not there. So she has to be able, in that 4-day period when she's there, she has to be able to not only coach the athletes, but coach the coaches on what you said, what that gray area looks like. Like they can identify, all right, well, that squat's broken, but that squat's perfect. But being able to identify not only like those technical components that are breakdowns, but also maybe, is it a mobility issue? Is it a strength issue? Like, or is it just like this kid's never actually done it before? So I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with that comment too. I love that. So being able to identify that gray area between incredibly bad and incredibly good. I think that goes a very, very long way, especially in social media. And then something else too that popped in my head as you guys were talking. I can't remember the name of the app, but I'm going to open up to you all to see if y'all can remember it. When I was in Ohio, we used this app. It was originally designed for CrossFit, but it was like an identification, and all it did was walk you through different mobility assessments: hips, knees, ankles, shoulders, upper back. And I can't remember the name of the app, but it was one that I think that you might be able to, that might fit your program really well, because you can say, hey, it's a free app, download this, it's part of your homework, or coaches, this is an app that your kids need to use, have them check this off and complete this mobility session assessment once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. I can't remember the name of the app, but anybody remember it off the top of your head?
I think it's a Go Wad.
Yes, that was it. It was Go Wad. I'm cheap, so I didn't pay for the premium version. So I know you can do assessments in the free version. So that might be a good one for you to throw out there for them too. So
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Coach.
I did want to ask you a question about some of your intra-lift stuff.
Sure.
So when you're thinking, when you're designing your actual program, so like you're sitting down and you're designing each segment of your workout and phase, what is your thought process behind each pairing? So like what mobility, like is there a sweet spot? Like you like, if you're doing a squat, here's the intra-lift they do. If you're doing a bench, here's your intra-lift. Like what are some of those things that like your favorite pairings, and kind of maybe talk about why you like some of those things?
Sure. So I have my favorite, but the way that I teach it is not my favorite. It's individualized. So when we're going through that first week that I'm in person with the athletes, and it was different when I was in my class, but I'll talk about like for right now, when I'm with them for that first week, I teach them. So let's take 90-90s, for example. So we learn like the lower basic swivels, hands behind your back on the floor. Your knees are just going side to side. Then we bump it up to the next one. Okay, your hands are off. You're upright as you can. Throw your knees over. If that hurts, you're probably going to stay on the swivels for a while. You're probably going to go back down for a little bit. If that doesn't, we're going to progress it into the 90-90 heel raised. And then we hold that right before you feel like your butt's going to cramp. They hold that position for a while. So within that week, they find where they fall within like the range of a 90-90. There are some that I know, like volleyball, you have to have really good shoulder mobility. And then when I took them through handcuffs with rotation, the typical ow, ow, ow in the same spots across the board, baseball, softball, volleyball, it's usually the same. So that one is whenever so let's go back to their like program. Say they're doing a back squat with a vertical jump. Well, it's not my turn to back squat and I already did my jumps. Oh, this is a perfect time for me to work on what I need to work on. And so we figured that out within that first week. I really was terrible at 90-90s. It hurt. Squats don't feel good to me. I'm going to stay with the swivels or the 90-90 rotations for a while. So they figure out kind of which ones were pain points for them, which ones they had injuries with before, ankle stuff. Combat stretch is a tough one. A lot of our basketball players lose ankle mobility because they live in braces for 6 years of their life and then they don't know how to move in a squat with no shoes, right? So like we figure that out the first week, and then they choose from a list that I have posted on Team Builder that they can access anytime. We've gone through them all by the time that week is over, and then they get to choose. If I am teaching this in a classroom setting where I have a lot of time, the first few, I would say like 4 weeks, I tell them which ones to do, and I list it as part of like A1, A2, A3, A4. Your A4 is going to be handcuffs with rotation. No questions asked, because I can tell like who's doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing it correctly. I don't have to fix a ton of stuff. They can watch and learn from each other. So if I have a year long, like a regular school year, I'm telling them what to do. And then eventually they get to kind of figure out which ones they need more of. But the way that I did it with this last school that I was just at, I taught them a few every day. So they learned all of them throughout the week. And now they're tasked with choosing which one fits them individually. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. So giving them the option, giving them the power, again, giving them the option to choose, so that it creates leadership. You have something, you need to be able to self-assess. You've already told them where they're weak at. So you put them, not necessarily put them in a bucket, but you put them in a mobility bucket of what they need. And then here are your options to help fill that bucket and get you out of it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And the kids, they like to choose when they can. And so it just gives them that little bit of freedom to say, oh, I'm going to do 90-90, even though all of my teammates are doing something else. They like that freedom. And it's something small. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. That's absolutely something that they can choose to do.
Absolutely. Well, coaches, panel, y'all have any other questions before we get out of here? Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody jumping on. Not only our panel members, thank y'all for taking the time to step out with us, but and Coach, you absolutely crushed it. Like the entire first 3 pages I have here are, while yes, there's some contrast stuff into it, but the vast majority of it is everything else, which is you hit the nail on the head with. It makes a huge difference. Like being able to build that relationship, being able to pour into kids, build them up, give them the confidence to function in a way that is going to force them to do what we need them to do is absolutely huge. So that's one massive takeaway, and that's why I love hosting these things, because not only is it sure it's great, we have great conversation, but it's stuff that I can take away and go right back into to my program and make me better. So I appreciate y'all for taking the time to step out and carve out a little bit of time and family time in summer, and really looking forward to it. Next week, we're going to be back at the same time. I'm sorry, I know I messed up the original email. I said 8:30, but I had a lot of people saying it was a little too late for us East Coast times in the summer. So we moved it up today. So we'll be back at 8 again next week. We're going to be hearing from Coach DeMarco Henry, who's out of the state of Indiana. He does a fantastic job. I think he was the NHSSCA Coach of the Year 2 years ago for the state. He's gonna absolutely crush it. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll get the link sent out on Sunday. This link, the link to this YouTube, as well as the Simplifaster article should be out, hoping by Thursday or Friday this week. So if you're looking to come back and rewatch, take notes again, that'll all be there. But again, I appreciate y'all for taking the time and jumping on. And Coach Meza, you crush it. Coach Schween was 100% right in everything he told me that you would crush it. So
Don't tell him that. Don't tell him he's right. No. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate the opportunity. You guys helped a lot.
absolutely. Well, thank you guys, and hopefully we'll see y'all next week. Talk to y'all later.
Bye, guys. Thank you.